Welcome to MOTS, where we'll be applying the Manzer or mostly Thurlow scale of quantitative analysis of pop culture narrative through a binary system.
Or MOTS! This podcast contains spoilers, mature content, and language. Viewer discretion advised. Hi, and welcome to MOTS, where we are reviewing... Well, it's getting towards Oscar season, I suppose.
It's coming up.
So we're starting to do, in a sense, our predictions for what might be the best pictures. And tonight we watched Netflix's fantastic film, which is, like, I love Netflix works, but this is on a level higher, Mudbound.
I will say, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I will say that Netflix has not been known for their feature-length films.
Dramas.
For the most part, other than...
Well,
Beast
they might now.
Beast of No Nation.
Yes.
But this movie might put them on the map a little bit.
Absolutely, and I think they... we'll get into our discussion on it.
You'll see why.
I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, and I admittedly caught some feels during this film. Here with Scott Thurlow.
And my dead heart also thumped a little bit at parts of this film.
It grew 2 sizes larger.
Like Mr. Burns, if you remember that. There it goes. Go ahead.
Stephen Ramosi.
Hey.
Perfect.
Well done.
So, Scott, would you like to start us off with our funny log line?
Yeah, so we weren't sure if we are going to actually do one at all for this film, given the nature of it and what it contains, but someone had mentioned this just precast, so I'm going to go with Gone with the Mud.
Yes,
and perhaps we'll see why that makes more sense.
Well, I'll try to illuminate that with the intro body conclusion. So this is a story about 2 families in Mississippi during the World War II era, a little bit beforehand, a little bit after.
Pre, during, and post World War II.
And one is a kind of white city slicker of sorts who's trying to return to his Mississippi roots and open up a farm there, which is equivalent of me saying, hey, I'm going to open up a farm, and ends as well as his venture does. And the other family is a kind of local black family that has lived there, and they're trying to do the opposite and escape Mississippi. And you see their interactions, the generational play between, and all these kind of racism, classism.
This movie tackles
sexism,
a lot of things.
The war.
The war
is huge.
And even though the different members of the family get prominence, I think the main driving force of this work is the budding friendship of one is the brother of the white family, the patriarch who moves down.
His younger brother.
Yeah, his younger brother. And the other is the son of the black patriarch who's already done there. They go off to fight in World War II. They come back dealing with the issues of the war, the change of life that came with it, and they get a budding friendship which ends as well as you expect from this kind of situation. So I think that's a decent summary of the film. If any of you guys want to go into anything.
I don't want to expand because I think what I will have to expand upon will come up in later questions, specifically the next one. But for going scores, I was going to give it a 3 because this is a very strong movie for sure. The narrative is very well done. And for various reasons, like I said, we'll get into it exactly why and how. But I think you guys might have convinced me that I was pretty... the movie got me pretty quickly. Although, as Ian might like to say, that viewing it in a more harshly critical eye, because I think the latter 2/3 were so good that the intro somewhat is... I'll say lackluster, but in the most generous way possible, in a sense. And I think you guys, again, precast, we talked a bit about that, and I think I'm going to have to agree that just because of the way, relative to the rest of the story, the intro was a little slow, I guess. I'll say it that way as well. So I might give it a soft 0, but a strong 2 overall for intro body conclusion.
I am going to agree. I think that the intro could have been done better. I think that in terms of and this may lapse into a conversation slightly about style, but
right, I get you.
I think that there are a couple of things that hurt the introduction. Two specifically. The first is that the introductory scene is very dark, and I'm not sure.
That is to say, lighting wise,
yes,
not tonally.
No, not tonally, but
yes.
But you can't see what's happening.
Yes,
and I think that's. At first, I thought maybe our contrast on the TV was like
it absolutely
set too dark or something like that. But you can't see a thing that's happening, and that bugged me. Also, the voiceover that is very prevalent in the beginning, in the intro of this movie, is, while not bad, I think somewhat unnecessary.
They could have curtailed a bit of it.
I think that you get the feeling of who all these characters are without that, and it slows the beginning of this movie a little bit.
Right.
And I think that plot wise, that makes it somewhat weaker than the other two parts. I'm not saying it's bad, but it's not as good as it could.
Steve, so to provide a little bit more context to what you're talking about, and to discuss this in a narrative framework, it cold opens to a rain-drenched burial scene. The two brothers, Henry and Jamie, are burying their father, or trying to dig a grave for their father.
Right.
And as you said, it's very dark. But so this kind of it's basically cold opens on the conclusion. So usually this is done to add a little bit of mystery, a little bit of foreshadowing. It's
Fight Club style.
I mean, there's so many different films
in media res, we'll say.
Yeah. And like, I'm fine with that, except that they also introduce a lot of characters, and they kind of use voice, and not just voiceovers, but the individual character voiceovers to speak their inner monologues, to differentiate who are the important characters in this ensemble piece, and who are just kind of the background characters who will be just
present throughout, but exactly. Not focused on. Yes,
and I think that they're doing the two styles definitely clash in the introduction, because it feels like it has the first introduction. Then it feels like it has a very long second introduction.
Yeah, true.
Introducing all the characters and establishing every single one of them, which I don't know. It didn't particularly work for me, and I'm going to judge it harsher, and especially since, as you said, Scott, this second 2/3 of the film, or maybe even like 3/4, are so strong that it,
relative to the beginning,
it makes it a glaring inconsistency for the introduction.
Yeah, I somewhat agree. Like I said, I think I was more forgiving of the intro than you guys were, but again, a la our precast discussion just before this, and given what you guys just said, I think I am going to be convinced to give it a very strong 2, but a 2 nonetheless, and specifically for the intro, because it did take a little while to just kick in the gear, I guess I'll say.
I agree.
Yeah, I'll agree with that as well.
So 2's all around. All right, Scott, on to you with themes.
All right, so who wants a 3-part episode? Because this movie tackles a number of very important themes, and I think in a great way, and like impressively, it weaves them all throughout the narrative very, very well, seamlessly switching between one and the other. So you've got, I think the big one is racism in the era, and as applied mirror to nowadays modern times. You've got classism. You've got domestic life. Especially dynamic between Henry and his wife, Laura, I believe her name was, as well as Hap and Florence. Family life, generational conflicts, and passing down of knowledge, and also prejudices. Like I mentioned, you've got the PTSD aspect of returning from a war, making friends over that, connecting with fellow veterans. Like all this stuff is in it, and even other things beyond this. Like I said, you can cover a lot of it, but all of this to say, Mudbound contains, like I said, a number of very important themes that are well handled and well integrated throughout. Each character touches upon a number of them, and they all, again, they sort of, because this is ensemble cast, which we'll get to soon, so you can see them sort of like flowing throughout every character's interaction with their family, with people, the two families, with other people in town, everything, everywhere. And like I said, I'm giving this a really strong 1. You guys free to expand in a second. But just because of the way it juggles those 5 or 6 themes that are still relevant today, and a nice, like I said, a nice mirror analogy to the cultural climate, if you will, back then, and still as we are living in these times.
You're absolutely right, and the thing that really struck me about this movie is that these themes could so easily have been clumsily handled or
mishandled.
Some of them could have been
dropped. Yeah,
could have been just glazed over.
Exactly.
Every single one of those themes that you mentioned, and there are a lot of them.
Yes,
are given the time that they are due
to breathe
in this movie. And it's not like it's a super long movie. It's fairly long. It's almost 2 hours.
It's just under 2. Yeah.
But it's about the same length as a lot of movies that are nowhere near as concise and exacting as this film is when tackling each one of these issues on its own. And that's what I love about it. You go through it and you see that it spends time talking about the racism in Mississippi, in like the Deep South at this time, just post World War II. It spends time talking about the PTSD that the GIs coming back from World War II experienced. It spends time talking about how those people that were at war have a bond that no one else has, and no one else can really understand
all those other boundaries. Yeah,
and that's a big one too.
Yep. That
you'll see being tackled as like one theme in a movie that is like that gets its own movie unto itself. You know, like all of these themes have that kind of feel to them, where like you could have spent 2 hours talking about just this
one of them, right? Yep.
And the fact that it goes through all of them, and none of them seem rushed. And none of them seem like they didn't get enough time, and none of them seem like the movie didn't say what it wanted to say, is a really strong mark for Mudbound, for this film.
You've seen similar themes tackled a lot in Vietnam era films.
Yeah, sure. You're right.
What keeps this fresh in a sense, and not just modern day politics, but is the fact that this takes place in the World War II and is exploring a side of World War II that you don't see often.
Yeah, you're right. Yep, absolutely right.
Now, there is, to be the annoying one, there is an element that I think they introduce and don't explore that much.
Yeah.
The character of Vera.
All right.
Not only do they have the poor black family living there, there's a poor white family who basically they had the same job. They were like they're hired hands on the farm, and like they're going through almost exactly the same troubles, except they're introduced.
They're much less of a part of the movie.
But but that's just a minor complaint. Now I'm going to talk about everything I loved in here.
Okay.
I love when they tackle dark concepts with the level of nuance they did. You have like the idea of Mike from Breaking Bad and
Mike Ehrmantraut.
Yeah. He plays the
racist Trout.
Yeah, he plays the racist grandfather, and he is explicitly racist. Everyone knows, but I like it. This will go to the character of Henry as well. But like the way that different generations handle their racism,
That's it.
Very interesting for that. And I don't know, like a lot of again, you guys pointed out this thing tackles all these concepts, but also again, just doesn't like make one comment about them. They actually explore all the different levels. So I don't know. I'm not. Again, you said you're going to be a 3-part episode if we go into all of them. So
just trust
watch
us
Mudbound and enjoy evering it has to say.
Trust us, like
Absolutely.
You said it pretty well, Steve-O, that it gave each of these things time to breathe, didn't glaze over it, didn't shortchange itself on touching upon them. And like I said, it's very impressive to me that it was able to do that and keep up with the narrative and make it all make sense and cut it up and pace it very, very nicely.
And Ian, I appreciate you bringing up the Vera thing. For whatever reason, I hadn't even thought about that as like something that. But yeah, that
still there.
That is the one thing that like seemingly landed on the cutting room floor, right? Like there was a lot more of that could have been explored.
They could explore it,
but there was so much more going on in this film.
And I think
they implied enough even with it, with what they had.
I'm not saying it's necessarily a flaw. I'm just saying that if there's one nitpick I can make with the themes,
which is a very small nitpick, of course.
Absolutely.
So strong one.
So yeah, strong one for me as well.
Hard one.
And I'm sorry. Go on.
Antagonist?
Yes. I was going to introduce myself for a second.
No need to do that. Just talk about antagonist.
The antagonist of this film is, Mike Ehrmantraut, as I'm going to call him. I'm not sure they ever call him by his. I don't know if we ever get his name.
He's credited
Pappy,
as Pappy the whole time, even in the credits here.
He is an antagonistic character, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure he's the antagonist of this movie. And I'm going to side with your standard
Lock it up, people.
answer for this movie for sure. It
has to be, right?
It's society. I blame society.
Society made me this way.
It shows how the what was it? Do you know what their last name was? Do you remember what their last name?
The family, no.
It shows how the black family that is living there, like how they are kept down, and
I don't remember either of their last names, in fact. But
I mean, it shows the struggles of both of these families, but it specifically, I think this movie specifically says, look, you guys are both in kind of a bad position, but one position is much worse than the other,
sure,
and it makes it very clear, and that's, that is a very well displayed antagonist in terms of society being the antagonist, or in terms of like it's a sign of the times being the antagonist. And
just the cultural mindset, like I said. I got one quick thing, sorry, if you're done. I'm going to meld ours because yes, my default answer, and I think it applies more so perhaps in this movie's case than others I brought it up in, but you got society, then you got prejudice / racism, and then as exemplified or personified, if you will, by Pappy, in a sense, right? So he represents that face of society.
Sure.
But it's still I think it's still a broader thing, is the antagonist is like you just said. So I'm sort of backing you up, but you you choose a corporeal antagonist.
Yeah.
And I choose an abstract one, but I think there's both in this movie, which is why, again, a credit to it.
I just want to jump in really quick, Ian. I know you have much.
Wait.
I know you have much to say.
So
I apologize. This is gonna take 2 seconds. I would also say that the age in and of itself, like losing her, the main, the wife of
Laura, I think is her name.
What was her name?
Laura or Florence?
Laura.
Okay.
Losing her child, is just a sign of this is shit that happens now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that I just want to throw that in as well.
Sure.
I'm sorry, Ian.
So I think an interesting aspect is, and this should probably been in themes, and I forgot to mention, the church that
good call, yeah.
gives discussions in, and he starts off with the foundations of a church, and he's giving this speech about incrementalism, about how they must suffer for for their children. Their children are not going to need to wake up in the same situation they are, and he ends the movie giving basically a prayer meeting over the health of his son, who's been attacked by the KKK.
Does he even say anything in that
No.
scene? He doesn't say anything. He just stands there looking at the congregation, which is super powerful.
Yeah,
Agreed.
The whole end of this movie is very, very, very powerful.
But the idea that, so when you look at Henry, who's the white patriarch, and Hap, the black patriarch there, they're both kind of stuck in the institution that they subscribe to. Hap is also, I'm not going to say anywhere near guilty for the happenings, but he has accepted, he has faith religiously and in the system that it will work. And Henry is a perfect example of the failure of the system. Yes, Pappy is blatantly racist. Henry is so institutionally racist. The way the entitlement he has over the fact that
he's racist by habit because of Pappy.
Yeah, like that, the way he's like, oh, I'll pay you now, but I expect the same service that historically you've owed to me, and you see the war, having that shared experience. Also, was it Laura? Was it she befriends? I'm going to put that in quotes. Florence.
They have a bond, certainly, to some extent.
To some extent, the thing is, to some extent,
right?
Because they have shared experience over losing children, over suffering. But it's always like there's always a feeling that they're never on the same level.
And even before that, Laura goes out of her way to help Florence to some extent again, and like buys Hap a doctor with her husband's money, which she catches a load of shit for that. And there's a very important line, I think, there where Florence says, I forget exactly. It was like, if you asked me before this, I would have said all white people are the same, or something like that.
Yeah, it was pretty close to that.
And like that's a very telling line about what this movie intends to say.
Yeah.
I agree.
So that the friendships are born from triumph, and they're, I don't know what the
shared struggle, maybe,
or not? Did I say triumph? A tragedy, shared struggle. I don't know what the opposite of that is. Is it the fact that like these, you see a bunch of characters moving past society and being at times punished for it, and like, is it just the institution? Is it the slow? Like we have these issues nowadays.
Yeah, I think it is to some extent. Like I said, and you can see a lot of parallels there.
So again, I agree more with the abstract concept of there, but I don't even know how to put words to that concept, because I don't think that Pappy's malevolent about it, but Henry's perhaps
like by default
cause of it, but nor do I think that he would ever like. I don't know. It's weird to me.
Right. So I think that's an interesting thing. And now that since we're on antagonists, and probably shouldn't dwell on this for too much longer, but I think that's an interesting point to bring up. Is that Pappy is the obvious villain in this, whereas Henry's racism is the possibly worse one, right? Because he is just saying,
how it is.
Play along to get along, basically. Like, we're going to keep doing what we've been doing the entire time. You don't come in. You don't leave by the front door. Yeah. You leave by the back door. But
not because he believes in it. Because he doesn't want to
rock the boat.
Yeah,
exactly. And but that's
the most insidious. Maybe more insidious version.
That's perhaps more insidious, or at least harder to speak out against, right? Because How can you be mad at this guy for just going along with status quo? Right. But certainly you should.
He's not putting on a hood, but he's turning a blind eye to the
right. And I'll say it this way. Perhaps this is a famous quote, but it's not the evil men; it's the inaction of good men. Because he could otherwise be a good man.
Yes.
So I'm still giving antagonist to one because it actually ties both abstract and again physical characters together.
I completely agree. Antagonist is getting a strong one for me.
Absolutely.
It's. The antagonism in this movie is everywhere.
Yes.
Let's just say that.
Its tendrils reach...
Oddly enough, the least antagonistic area is war-torn Germany.
In a sense.
Well, that's, for our characters.
It's full of love as far as what we see, except for the murderous scenes.
In terms of this narrative. Sure.
So I'm on to protagonists then. And this is... there's a good argument that we made that it's a few characters or an ensemble piece.
I say ensemble. What do you say?
Well, I'm gonna start with the two that I think are obvious. Or Henry and not Henry, Jamie and Rondell. Their friendship carries this movie.
Agreed. It is the heart of the film.
I would watch a 2-hour buddy movie with just the two of them.
Yes.
Yeah, you did say that during the film,
and
in a moment of levity.
And the fact that they're both with Jamie being so self-destructive because of his post-traumatic stress disorder, and having built a life in Germany, that he had to leave to go back to his family.
Ripped away from because they won the war.
And one of the most important lines I think in here is when Jamie says to Ron, like, go back to your family, but not to his.
I hope you find your family.
Yeah. Not to your the Hap,
actual family.
And go back to Germany. You'll be happy there. And it's such a. The thing is, like, there's a sense of dread over their friendship the entire time because you know that just by the narrative structure and the themes and that it's going to meet a bad end.
Yeah, something bad is coming, indeed.
And it absolutely does.
I mean, yeah, I agree. To a large extent, to overuse that phrase we've been saying. Yeah, it's an ensemble piece. But I think they're sort of like the heart of, if this is like a graph or a circle almost. Jamie and Ronzel are the heart of it, and then everyone sort of like orbits around them. And yes, you follow their lives as well. Henry, of course, is a big Henry and Laura. So again, there's a lot of like nice parallels and mirrors with them being like the central one of it.
Yeah. Well, I would say that they are the protagonists of the later movie, right? Like
sure.
The early movie,
I see what you mean.
Is all about Hap and
Henry, yes,
and Henry
sure.
and
their
Laura and Florence, and I think that everybody. Well, first of all, so let's just say this. I'm going to say that all the protagonists are the ones that have speaking parts as narration.
Yeah, I'll agree.
Okay.
I think that's an easy way.
That's a fine measuring
to
stick.
cut it up, and so that's the six characters that we mentioned, right?
Yep.
It's Hap
and Florence, Henry and Laura,
Florence, Laura,
Jamie and
Ronzel, and those characters are all great in their own way.
Agreed.
Henry is the most problematic of them, of course. Laura is just a yearning character that just married somebody because she was 31 and a virgin and didn't know what else to do.
She wants to escape her dead-end life.
Yeah, exactly.
She got another dead-end life.
Exactly.
Right, and it sucks because like she was so full. Like she wanted to embrace culture, and she ended up in a mud farm.
The opposite
basically.
of that. Yes.
So like that's tragic. Henry is never able to escape his built-in racism.
He's well-meaning, but also falls into that trap.
Hap is never able to escape his indentured servitude, basically. Florence is kind of brilliant as a character. Like, as a person, her character is
she's a very strong
kind
character.
of fucking brilliant. Like, a very strong woman, very smart, and just is stuck with what she was born into, kind of. And like, and the two younger characters, Jamie and Ronzel, both have this promise, even after going through the struggles of World War II, of this better life. And they both, and this is why this is a uplifting movie at the end. Like, a lot of terrible shit happens, but why it's an uplifting movie at the end is the two of them go on, in terms of their the new generation goes on to
something brighter than what
Jamie goes out to Los Angeles, and Ronzel goes and finds his family. Like, they, even though he doesn't have a tongue anymore, which we didn't mention, he gets his tongue cut out by the Ku Klux Klan. I guess that deserves at least a mention, right?
Or I was going to just leave it to the movie viewers to pick up.
It was one of the darker things that happened.
Oh, well, spoiler alert, some shit happens. But he has some bad shit happen to him, but he does go and find his family, and theoretically finds his place in the world in Germany.
It's bittersweet.
Exactly.
But I just want to say that Hap is the most honest man in Mississippi. It's just an honest, like, hardworking kind of guy. Tries always to do right by people. And Henry is the most purposefully ignorant person I've seen in a film in a long time.
Absolutely. He does not want to go. He does not want to know what's going on.
Thick as a brick.
Yes. Good description.
Jethro Tull.
Yes.
The Hap at the end gives us a sermon over the dead father, and like just doing it like in a very kind of like saying that basically your father's.
He basically was like, "Fuck this guy."
Your father was
who's dead.
Yeah.
And Henry's not really paying attention. It's like,
you can't grasp the fact that he was almost being, if I may say this, almost being trolled at his own father's funeral in a sense, but in a very poignant way because Hap does understand what's happening and is doing it on purpose, and Jamie certainly understands it. But like you said, Henry's like, all right. Like,
see, here's the thing: is for everything that goes down in this film, Henry's main antagonist is the rain.
Yes,
it's fun.
The problems of farming life.
Yeah, he's got to go. And he doesn't know. He doesn't want to know.
He sees the rains down in Mississippi.
So anyways,
but I think that it's a very strong ensemble cast. Mary J. Blige does a phenomenal job here.
For sure, yeah.
Totally unrecognizable.
She should get a nod.
Yeah, she should definitely get a nod.
She does not have yellow hair in this, that's for sure. So, yeah, she looks...
You might not recognize her, but she gives a hell of a
phenomenal performance.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to say one thing. Maybe I meant to bring this up in themes, but at least a la Laura and Florence, they also represent sort of like the struggle of women in the era and also still today as well. So, granted, we are not women here either, but I did have to mention that because they portrayed that aspect of their characters very, very well. So that's why, and that and everything else we just said, to give them a very strong one on protagonist.
I'm going to, one for protagonist for me as well.
All right, Scott. Who's left for supporting?
Exactly. So I've been waiting to this one. Like, I'm not sure. The thing is, the town itself, like the era and the farm, we sometimes give locations like a supporting character role. I'm not sure if I'm going that far in this film, but because of what we just said, there's not many people left. Maybe Pappy counts, but we also lumped him mostly under antagonist, right? So maybe they sort of like cross over the main characters. And maybe their families, like, so the younger siblings, like Hap and Florence's like younger children, perhaps, and even like and Henry and Laura's like two little daughters, like they're there, but they're just sort of like background noise. I guess I'll say Alma might count, like you brought it up earlier. Vera, I'm sorry, and Alma was her daughter, right?
Yeah.
And whoever her cheating husband was,
Carl.
Yeah, so that stuff was there, like. Again, like the race, like the racist Southern members, like the KKK guys show again, like, and they have a confrontation with them. But I don't know if there's enough there. Like they're not cardboard cutouts per se. They have to be there to serve the point in the film. But like you said, your initial question was who the fuck is left? Like not many people. I don't know. Like that's all I have to say. I'm wavering upon this one. I'll tell you that. So you guys go ahead.
I think Hap's family is pretty. Now, granted,
you're right.
But Henry and. Is it Laura?
It is Laura. I'm pretty damn sure.
Their children.
I hope it's Laura. We've been saying that the entire time.
I looked it up. I looked up the credits. Anyway.
Their children really don't do much, to be honest. But I think that Hap's family is quite fleshed out. They had the one daughter who wanted to be a stenographer. He had the baseball
and his second youngest.
And I just think that, and perhaps it's more towards Hap, but the optimism he had about the future of his family really resonated throughout the entirety of it. And I can give that a 1. And perhaps the guys who are just standing outside the
same racist motherfuckers hanging around outside the door of the shop. I mean,
here's the thing: is what's interesting to me is the interplay between, especially Ron in this, and how the townsfolk, different townsfolk, treat him. So, like the store owner was pretty friendly to him.
Yeah,
like
she's not overtly or even covertly racist. They're just they know each other from town and and what's happening.
Hold on,
I think we're good.
All right,
camera's acting up.
Yes, camera's. So, but again, I think that you do see the interplay of the racism, and that works towards both the narrative and the themes of the work. So that's my argument.
I think I agree. Actually, you go, Steve-O, but I think I'm already there.
I've got two characters. One you mentioned, the daughter, the stenographer daughter. These are the two reasons I'm giving her 1. I loved that character.
Yeah,
I thought she was great, and she played. She hammed herself up as much as she possibly could.
I think she did a good job.
And that's what I'm saying. Like she made the most out of that part.
Yes,
as it could possibly be. And who was the other one? I had a second character.
Is it the guy in the
and Vera. Oh, yeah. And Vera, I thought did a great job as well. And on the strength of those two characters, I think I have to give this a 1. There are other characters, there are other supporting characters who are all fine. They all do a fine job. They're mostly forgettable, I think. But on the strength of those two characters, and the rest of Hap's family is good too. Yeah. But the daughter who's a stenographer is the one that obviously really sticks out in all our minds. She's the one that we all mentioned.
She had the most characterization of the secondary ones. Sure.
Or the kids who were playing military. Gotcha, cracker.
Oh yeah, exactly.
That's great. That's
exactly.
great.
It's a good little moment.
That's wonderful. It's one little moment for sure.
True.
The daughter who's going to be a stenographer keeps cropping up and does a great job every time she's on screen. So I'll give her credit for that.
No, I agree with you guys.
Give this a 1.
Just one last. I have to give a shout out to the one guy I knew was dead the minute he said, "Oh, it's your daughter's birthday."
Well, that was Jamie's pilot buddy.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll get you out of this war, and whenever anyone says that,
No, you won't, motherfucker.
So I mean,
But I also, on a more serious point, the fact that there are 6 protagonists in this film, all sharing a decent amount
duties,
of time,
yeah.
the fact that some extras can even rise above is noteworthy. So.
You're right, and I want to give this movie as much credit as I can, and I think I will give it a if not a solid 1 because of what you just said, and on that front, that it was perfectly fine, and secondary characters filled it out pretty well.
All right, Mr. Ormosi, dialogue.
I wish that I knew more about Southern dialects, and I wish that I could not pick this apart, but I wish that I knew whether or not
it's accurate.
I wish I knew how accurate it was. However, not knowing that, I thought that it was the dialects were really well done. I loved every character had kind of this, and this I feel this way about a lot of movies that are done mostly in a Southern
setting,
dialect,
Southern drawl,
is that it has an almost a feel of poetry to it, right? And this movie is no different. It just kind of feels like because it's a different way of speaking. It has a rhythm to it that you kind of get to feeling as you go through it. Fuck you, Ian.
Anyway, go on.
But no, I think that, and regardless of that, I think that this film has incredible dialogue throughout. Every scene that I can remember is poignant. Every scene that I'm thinking about right now is poignant. Every time that Hap and Henry get together is this very they have their own
dynamic
and Jamie and Ron and Ronzel.
I believe I'm just gonna call him Ron.
Yeah, I'm gonna call him Ron. Just
have their own dynamic. And there are a lot of these pairings in this film.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly.
And all of them
Mirrors,
have their own distinct but very good dynamic, and that I think that's a sign of really good dialogue throughout the film. So I will leave it there. I'll let you guys.
I largely agree, of course, because I think dialogue is another one of the strongest points of this film. And I believe we did some small, quick research that it was based on a novel and then adapted. So I think I mentioned that it felt sort of like not a screenplay, a stage play, in a sense. And the poetry angle that you mentioned, I definitely saw that and thought it was well handled. And yeah, there were some great lines. But I want to bring up, Steve-O, you just said you were thinking about the poignant scenes, which yes, there are many and they're very well done. But the movie also had moments of levity, or the friendship between Jamie and Ron, and other little touches like that. So I think it's very well balanced, perfectly paced. Which maybe I'm speaking a bit style crossover here, but the actual dialogue, the monologues, and everything that everyone said, and as you mentioned, the intricacies of the relationship dynamics between all the characters is very, very strong. So that's my 2 cents.
I think that I was good to great.
Yeah, I'll agree.
And you already brought this up, but the idea when Jamie and Ron are together, especially when their friendship really does bloom.
It is Ronzel, by the way. I just looked it up. I'm sorry.
I'm still going to call him Ron.
Just easier.
They're I feel that the two actors had great chemistry and had it was a very believable relationship between the two.
Yes.
And their dialogue was witty, but never
natural and organic.
Yeah, it was always natural and organic. So I'm going to give this a 1.
Yep. one of the stronger ones, or
Yeah.
a stronger one as well for me as too.
What do you say? By the way, while we're still on dialogue for the moment,
I'm trying to remember a
what
line.
do you say? Like when he got in the truck, he's like, "Yeah, I'd be happy to see me too."
Yes.
Like it was just
It's a nice little
out of
little
nowhere,
jokey line, but...
really funny for like no real reason other than that they had great chemistry together.
and that and also
that line being good is based on their chemistry.
But also, it was perfect. Jamie's character would say that, and
Yeah.
it was a perfect placement.
Of course.
So yeah,
So one's all around on dialogue.
I think so.
So I'm on to style.
You are on style.
You are style.
Ronnie. I like the tilt of his hat.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, it's
I'm
so
glad
good.
you remembered that one. Go on.
But it's not for a negative, but I mean, this is where it felt like a Netflix film than necessarily a major
See what you
production.
mean, yeah.
But it didn't need a ton of, like, for instance, just be negative for a moment. A couple of the World War II scenes, especially the flying scenes,
Yes.
felt a little bit
I know
lower
exactly what you
budget,
mean.
especially considering Dunkirk that came out just recently.
Mm.
Like they're completely different monsters, though, and this had more of a kind of. I felt an old school type movie that I haven't seen in a little while. It's not trying to be flashy; it's trying to be down to earth. There's a little bit like a short story in a sense, or a novella in a sense, in the way of how it handled certain things. I don't know. Like, I think it was good style. It's not like the most groundbreaking style I've ever seen, but it was perfect for what it needed to be. It dealt with like the use of the symbolism of mud and being like trapped there, and being the limited, the rain's limited movement, and how all these characters were constantly being drenched and just like stuck in the mud. It worked. It worked. I mean, it's not the best, but it's good.
It was a fine motif. I agree. So I guess I'm gonna give it a solid one, probably at the end of the day. And you mentioned the other scene that we can nitpick, like the scene that was just literally too dark to see what's happening on screen. And yeah, like you could. I also thought that very same thing during the flying parts, the airplane parts of World War II. But overall, I thought they had some good shots, and I'm gonna still see those angle and bring up the soundtrack because I thought that was really well done. It was great dramatic music. It had tension sounding music, if you will, like parts to it when it needed to, and it was very nicely married to the actual narrative. So yeah, sure, you can point to a little couple roadblocks, and I absolutely see the ones you're talking about, and there are a few others, but by and large, I think it was perfectly fine, perfectly solid, and it all made sense and matched, and I'm going to give it credit on style.
I will say that you make a very good point about the flying scenes. They could have been better if there was more money, I guess, to throw at it. However,
But it wasn't the point of the
I
film.
will
so-
say that the landscape, countryscape scenes, I guess I'll call them,
Sure.
were gorgeous.
Mm.
And I do have my nitpicks for sure. And I have already mentioned that.
Sure.
In the first scene, it was way too dark.
I'm not saying it's perfect by any means.
And I thought that might have... I was hoping that the darkness of that scene would play into something later.
Nope.
And it was for a reason, but it really wasn't.
Sure.
And that bugged me a little bit. But overriding that was that there were...
The rest of the fucking
that there
film.
there were brilliant shots in this film.
Mm-hmm.
There was a scene right after Laura lost her child where Florence was comforting her and draping an arm across her face.
Yeah, remember that?
That is one of the more beautifully shot scenes that I've seen in a long time. And there's a lot like that. Like that's the one that stands out. But
Sure.
like
There are many other...
there's a lot like that in this movie. And as you mentioned, the soundtrack is incredible. It's just great. Like pastoral songs and like it's just great like church music from around that time and on top of that
it's
like
the ambient music
kind
as
of
well.
and on top of that kind of just really good sound effects throughout this film, and the mud
motif, if you will.
Motif
I do like that.
Is pretty incredible as well. Like, you know, they really play that up, and the fact that it's called Mudbound, obviously that was a very important thing to them, and I think that worked really well for this film. So I'm gonna give Style a very strong one.
Yep, I'll have to say same thing.
I'm not going to give it a very strong one. I'm going to give it a soft one.
Soft to solid.
But it doesn't matter
Still
in the
one.
end because it's still a 1. So
It's a 1
I
nonetheless.
feel you. One bound.
just for posterity's sake. So Scott, on the recommendation.
Yeah, I highly recommend Mudbound. I hope it gets a lot of recognition. I hope it indeed puts Netflix possibly to break through like streaming services. I know you said Manchester did it last year.
Yeah, for Amazon.
So
Manchester,
I hope we're like coming to a new sort of era, if you will, that films like this from these channels get recognized, because it was a goddamn really well done film, and I think everybody out there should see it. If you haven't yet, it just came out today, in fact, or on the day of this recording. So hopefully it gets some more traction. But yeah, it was really well put together, and I say see it regardless of normally I'd be like, I recommend it, but only if XYZ. I just recommend this film outright. Check it out.
Yeah,
that's all I gotta say.
Not that I wish for the era of theater of going to see films in theaters comes to an end, because I really actually enjoy going to see films in theaters, but Amazon and Netflix
They're doing a hell of a job. At least with this
have been doing a good job in terms of TV.
Sure.
And if they start doing as good of a job in film, like in movie,
full length features,
feature film,
sure.
In that regard, I will be happy to watch these movies as they arrive. Like I said, I do like going to see films in theaters, but if Netflix can put out movies like this and Beast of No Nation and that caliber film, and Manchester by the Sea, which was also really good, even though Casey Affleck's a piece of shit. Another story for another day.
He acted well in that film, we'll say.
Right.
Sure.
I am happy to check out these movies as they come along, and I'm going to give this a very strong recommendation. Check it out.
Probably the most important film I've seen so far this year. It deals with a lot of interesting topics, as we've discussed. There's a sense of tension that Steve-O has ruined
I apologize.
over the course of this entire thing, especially as you see these people in desperate situations starting to find some semblance of happiness. You know that...
I'm sorry. Have I ruined it? If you have not seen this movie before, you should not be listening to our review.
Well, then why do we even do recommendations then? This is a fantastic movie. If it doesn't get the Oscar nod, then it's not because of the merits of this film. It's the bias.
It's the snubbery of the Academy. I agree.
So,
I agree.
Yep, here we are. So I'll give out the scores. 9, 9, 9. So
nice.
A 9.
I think it deserves a 9.
Cheers.
Yes, it does. I'm Jonathan Ian Manzer, here with Stephen Hermosi.
Have a good night.
And Scott Thurlow.
I need to go find a mule to plow my own mud fields. See you next time. Good night.
Editing and engineering by Scott Thurlow. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates.